From FingerLakes1.com, this is Inside the Finger Lakes. I'm Josh Durso, and today our program begins with a question that's weighed on a lot of minds recently. When is school coming back? And what will K-12 education even look like after the COVID-19 pandemic? There are a lot of questions about the structure of education, but even more unanswered ones about how schools are going to be funded in New York State. This week, a conversation with South Seneca Superintendent Steve Zielinski. He shared with us what the last several weeks have been like and looks ahead at what school might look like when it returns. In fact, that's where we pick up today's conversation. All right. So question number one, how do you think school has sort of changed permanently because of what's going on right now? How a classroom might look different moving forward, given the circumstances?
Change permanently? I don't know. It's certainly true that, as we've adjusted to this situation and put things in place as far as communication and connection at home, through online resources, that has, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot as an administration, and we've learned a lot teacher to student about, the effectiveness of communicating this way. I know one of the things I've seen from a lot of different districts is imagining what might happen on snow days in the future. Now that we're sort of used to the idea of continuing with learning while kids are at home, maybe snow days look different. Of course, the big problem is that there really is no substitute for kids being in person, in school, working with teachers. And so let's not fool ourselves to think that this is an equal replacement to what it is that we already do every day in school. There's a reason that we emphasize attendance policies so much and urge people to come to school because we're just so much more effective, person to person than with a medium like this. I guess maybe my answer to your question about changing things permanently is we've been forced to teach ourselves how to use a new set of resources. And so I guess maybe the best answer is that we're better equipped now than we were before with our toolkit of possibilities to make things happen. But I don't want to suggest for 1 second that it's an equal replacement.
So walk us through what your day looks like given the circumstances right now and how that maybe differs a little bit from what it was, say, 40 days ago.
Well, I can say that I had some experience doing video conference meetings before, but now it seems like it's all video conference meetings. So, there's an exhaustion to that. It's not the way that we typically communicate with each other. And even though it works, and I can have a conversation with you using this method, I find that it's to do this one after another can be pretty exhausting. I think I talk a little bit louder when I'm yelling into the screen. And so nothing to do with any other kind of illness. I finished the day with a sore throat just because I'm screaming at the screen all day. It's really emphasized, I think, the things that we miss about being together in person. I've even come to realize how much I appreciate just the opportunity to walk around and see people in classrooms and be in the hallways and sit in on meetings. And it's very, very different to do a video conference than it is to just be in the space of what's going on. I like to think that I do twice as much listening as speaking. In this venue, it's really important to talk. And so you asked me what my days are like. I'm trying to connect with our different directors, the director of food service, the director of transportation, the director of facilities, in our administrative team mostly, but also the Board of Education, and in a lesser respect, the teachers and the staff. I'm talking about personally myself. And then also our communications people, because another huge challenge I think I shared with you by email before is that our capacity for getting things done in a small district falls on just a few people, and it's hard to do a great job of doing the constant kind of communication that is necessary in a crisis like this, to update the website and to keep the social media going. And we do have some people on that, but it's a challenge.
Have you found it, since this new normal has come to be, that it's a little more difficult to quote unquote turn it off, to sort of take yourself away from work? Do you feel like you're stuck in that? Because me personally, that has been one of the big challenges throughout my entire career, is like this, we're always working kind of mentality. And of course, you as a superintendent, you're always working, but if you're not going to a place and leaving a place, is it a little more difficult now to shut that off and to sort of put work to the side every once in a while, even if it's just to sort of recharge your brain a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, it's it's very true. It's also true that we've always kind of felt like we're on duty 24/7. But in this situation, I keep joking that we've built decades of experience up to learn what all the rules are and the laws and the regulations, and then everything gets turned upside down in 1 month, and we're creating things from scratch. And there's this feeling all the time like I've left something out, or there's still another task to look at. There's another system to build. There's another piece of communication to get out there. And you walk away from the day, and suddenly you remember, oh, I got to do that too. And so I think that there's that phenomenon of yes, always feeling like something is left undone, or some loophole isn't closed, and it's a challenge.
How impressive! You mentioned food service as one of the things that sort of evolved for school districts across the region. How impressive has it been watching that come together in such a short amount of time? And what do you think that says about the folks who are the food service directors, the ones who are, not only on the front lines, but sort of orchestrating this entirely new experimental process, essentially feeding kids
Yeah.
away from the schools?
Yeah, you can't say enough about it. When I say we're building new systems, none of that is more true than in food service. Our first thought was to mimic what we've done in summer feeding for communities, but we quickly realized that that was far inadequate to the need that was presented here to keep people fed through an extended closure. And so we just had to build a new system from scratch. Our first approach was to think that we would set up a few different community pickup places. As I talk about a lot at South Seneca, we're, from terms of population, we're small, but in terms of geography, we're very big, 130 square miles in South Seneca. And so our initial thinking was, well, we'll set up a pickup in Ovid, and a pickup in Interlaken, and a pickup in Lodi, and maybe that'll work. And it didn't take us long. It took us less than a week to realize that really wasn't going to do it. And so we shifted immediately into a mode of doing the door-to-door deliveries that we've continued all along through the closure, and will continue into the foreseeable future. But that puts a lot of responsibility on the people to make that happen. So Kathy Bishop is our director of food service at South Seneca. I loved it in a recent board report. She wrote that we like it that we're considered essential, and they certainly are. So we deliver 3 times a week. We use our bus drivers to do the deliveries. We take care to make sure that everybody that's working in the system is doing everything they can to protect themselves and each other. We've leveraged the fact that we're a small district to be able to have personal communication with 100% of our families. So the first thing we did was we asked them if they needed the food. And so that was our starting point. And we are committed to checking back in with them on a regular basis if they initially denied or declined the service, that we can check back in with them to see if circumstances have changed. And we already know that some circumstances have changed, and we keep adding families to the delivery list. So just the fact that we built this thing from scratch, and we have people rotating shifts to prepare the food, to box the food, and then to deliver the food 3 times a week, in addition to the other ways that we get food to community members. It's incredibly impressive, and it's probably the most impressive thing that we've pulled off.
How long can a district like South Seneca sustain that type of effort? It looks like there probably won't be a continuation of this current school year, or at least that doesn't really seem to be totally clear at this point. But how long is the district or districts sort of, gaming this out and sort of theorizing how long they may have to continue doing this?
Well, we've built something that can last. It is sustainable as long as we have the funding to sustain it. So, I don't know if your future questions have anything to do with the economic impact here, but
We're going there.
It's very much on our minds that, assuming that our revenue remains something close to what it's been, then I think that we can sustain this. We're already talking about the long term, and Kathy Bishop has been adjusting the ordering of food. We've also been facilitating and accepting donations from amazing community members and businesses that have brought food our way. And so we're thinking about variety, we're thinking about nutrition all the time, and we think that we can keep this going. However, all bets are off if we have massive withholding of funds moving forward.
All right, let's get into that. What are the financial implications that you sort of see on the horizon now, given some of the different scenarios that could potentially play out? Obviously, no clear signal at this point yet from Governor Cuomo or from the federal government in terms of what's going to be coming at the state or federal level, but there's concern, obviously, and you sort of alluded to it already, but walk us through what your big concerns are right now.
Yeah, well, South Seneca is a district that relies about 2/3 on state and federal aid for revenues, about 1/3 for property taxes. So out of a $25 million budget, it's about an $8 million tax levy, and the rest comes from state and federal monies. So in good times, we can always expect a modest increase in state aid annually as they build the state budget. But even in good times, we've recognized that, perhaps, the state will not be able to afford to keep doing increases into the future. When times are not good, then we start to worry. The last time around with the recession around 2010, we lived through years of what they call the gap elimination adjustment in New York State, where the state aid is allocated to the districts, but then withheld. It was withheld on an annual basis. And for South Seneca, that added up to about $6 million over the few years that was taking place. And, just like a lot of other districts, we had to do a lot of reductions in order to accommodate that. This time around, it looks like it could be even worse. So, the first set of aid runs that came with the passage of the New York State budget, sort of kept things flat. What it did was it reduced state aid, and then on paper immediately replaced it with the allocation from the Federal CARES Act, with the federal money to account for the reduction from the state side. But I think that people appreciate Governor Cuomo's straight talk about this situation. And one of his comments is, "I can't protect schools from reality." And the reality is that they were already facing a revenue deficit, a deficit in the budget, and now that those projections have just gotten more dire. And everybody's aware of the unemployment and the shutdown of businesses, and everything that feeds revenue in the state is threatened with extended closures that are incredibly necessary. But when we're talking about now, tens of billions of dollars of deficit, we know that the withholding of aid is on the way. They've already built into the system that there are 4 periods of time when the director of budget can look at the aid allocated to schools and do this withholding. The first one's coming right up in 10 days on April 30th. And then June 30th, December 31st, and March 31st are the 3 other ones. And we're prepared for massive withholding of aid as a reaction to the reality of the revenue situation. I know that they're working right now federally in Washington on another stimulus package. And what we're hoping from the public schools of New York State side of things is that some of that federal money will be directly allocated to public schools in New York State. New York is the epicenter of the outbreak in the country. And so we feel like, New York perhaps needs as much help as any state in the union. And, the fact that public schools are working, as we've just been talking about, not only to do food distribution, but also to try to continue learning for kids and accommodate, childcare for the frontline workers of healthcare and first responders. It's just an enormous undertaking. And, you and I have spoken in the past about everything that we ask a school district to do nowadays. We take it on happily. We care about our families, and, in many ways, we're a primary resource for them. But the only way that we can continue to do that is if we're funded. And so, the thought of losing up to millions of dollars of aid, it's the fuel that runs our programs. To be without that just means that we're not going to be able to do what we want to be able to do.
How does a district, because here's the outsider is going to look at this and understand that, South Seneca is a very small district in the grand scheme of New York State. How does a district that small find new ways or ways in general to cut, to save when you're talking about potentially millions of dollars in aid? I mean, you're saying what you're saying sounds to me like you're talking about cuts in staffing areas, but at the same time, how much can you cut staff to potentially save what ends up being millions of dollars at the end of the year?
Right. Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? We're already at a small staff capacity to do what we're asked to do. Every single person in the organization, we have about 200 employees now. Every single one of us has got a full plate of responsibilities. We really don't have extras. So every person has got a job description that's necessary and sustains what it is that we're trying to do for our families in the district. And so when we turn our attention to making cuts and removing staff positions in the case of losing funding, it scares us. It's scary not only to sit across from a person at a table and let them know that their job is no more, but when we think about what it is we're trying to accomplish and who we need to be able to do that, we already don't have enough. So trying to make those kinds of decisions is nothing that we look forward to.
And I'm curious in terms of, because ordinarily when I have you in on the show this time of year, we're already talking about next year because that's
Yeah,
kind of how it
yeah,
all works.
it's true.
How do you go through, given everything we just talked about, how do you go through and, you know, even just on a basic level, structurally start to plan for the next school year when so much is, right now up in the air? Is that going to
Yeah,
create basically like a rush scenario where this summer, perhaps in a matter of weeks, you guys have to not only figure out the X's and O's of the dollars, but then also figure out structurally what, the 2020-2021 school year is going to look
yeah,
like?
yeah. Well, even before that, we're just trying to make it through the rest of the spring.
Yeah.
What we're keenly aware of at this moment is all of the opportunities that are being missed, especially for our senior class.
Yeah.
This is the time of year now when, we're celebrating the senior class. And we have events that do that, and it leads up to a graduation ceremony. And so, to get to your question, we're simultaneously managing the day-to-day demands of getting done what we need to get done right now. And I already spoke about how hard that can be because we're creating things that never were created before. So, we're making decisions and communicating these decisions in real time for the short term. Each time we get another 2 weeks of closure, we think about what those 2 weeks are going to look like. But at the same time, so many people are wondering about the future and would like to know the answers to the questions about what's going to happen with our graduation ceremony, what's going to happen with awarding of scholarships at the end of the year that we do on a routine basis. What's the summer going to look like? What's next year going to look like? And unfortunately, too often the answer is we don't know that yet. Because we don't really know what June 15th is going to even look like yet. If we miraculously end up back in school, then that's very much different than if we're still in a closure period. We don't know what the restrictions are going to be in terms of holding any kind of public graduation ceremony. Maybe we should decide to postpone the ceremony into the summer months. I think people would probably happily take a ceremony if they could get one in August, and if we couldn't have one at the end of June. But even that, we don't have enough information to know what the parameters are going to be or what the restrictions are going to be and able to do that. So when you talk about 2021, we've built the calendar, and already we're in the mode of thinking about how the normal summer activities are going to happen, and professional development that goes on leading up to the opening of school in September. And then right behind those plans are the question, well, are we going to open school in September? What if we don't? What if we come back and then we have to close again? I think that it's fair to say we'll be a little bit better prepared for that if that happens. But at the same time, it makes it so difficult to do this kind of long-range planning or anything that approaches normalcy for what it is that we do. And so much of what we do is really, really important. It's important stuff to have all of these structures in place to support the work that we do, because we've become so much more than just education. For a rural community like South Seneca, there's a lot that families rely on us for, and that we want to provide.
What are you hearing from teachers, faculty, those who are still interacting with students? How are the students holding up? How is the faculty holding up? And are there any concerns in terms of where students are now versus where they're going to be in the fall? Obviously, a lot of state tests have been sort of put on ice for now.
Right.
Regents exams are over with, not happening.
Yeah.
What are sort of the base level expectations for that moving forward, and compare that to what you're hearing now from the boots on the ground, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's two things at once. Starting with the positives, it has really been, just as I described with the food service operation, it's really been incredibly inspiring to see what teachers have come up with in order to stay connected with our students. I mentioned before leveraging the fact that we're small. Even before we did our closure, we did some work to line up our roster of kids with our adults, so that we sort of formalized what we've always done informally, which is saying that every kid has an adult advocate. And so, from our side of things, adults in the operation, not just teachers, but everybody, took on the responsibility of a small list of students and said, during the time that we're out, I will make a personal connection with this list of students just to make sure that they're okay, to see how things are going and to make sure that they're getting what they need during this time. From an academic standpoint, it's been amazing to see what's been built in terms of online learning, classrooms, the videos that get distributed, the live and asynchronous connections that are happening with kids. And so all of that has been really amazing and impressive. On the flip side, all the stress that we've been talking about is shared by everybody. So it's being shared by people at home that are receiving this material, and the people that are creating the material. So teachers ask themselves, am I doing enough? Teachers ask themselves, am I doing too much? We reach out to families to get feedback about how are you receiving this? Is it overwhelming? Because if you think about, every, especially a secondary student has got multiple teachers on their course load. If they're receiving materials from multiple teachers at home, what does that add up to in terms of a responsibility over the course of the day? I've heard lots of comments about, the person who's working at home just with adults in the house versus when they also have their own children to take care of. And if you got 3 or 4 or 5 of those at home, how do you get this done? Yeah. So, we've heard the whole spectrum of stress and inspiration around this. And what we're just starting to get to now, a month into this thing, is a little bit more collaboration on teacher teams, just to be thinking about, as families are receiving this material, how much is too much, and should we sort of kind of work together to make sure that on the home end that things aren't so overwhelming that it just becomes something to avoid.
Well, Steve, appreciate the time as always. Good luck with everything you guys have going on. We will definitely be catching up with you again here. I'm sure in the coming months, just because it's evolving by the minute, like you said, and it's really important work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Josh. Anytime, and I look forward to talking some more. Thanks for the work you're doing as well. It's really important.
Thanks for listening or watching. Inside the FLX is a production of FingerLakes1.com digital media. It's presented by FL1 News and hosted by me, Josh Durso. New episodes are released on demand each week on FingerLakes1.com or the FingerLakes1.com app. You can also catch episodes anywhere you find podcasts. If you have an idea for an episode or question you'd like answered on the show, visit InsideTheFLX.com to submit it. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.